So this is a 2021 TLX with the tech package and the super handling all-wheel drive that I have on loaner. Well, my current 2008 TL Type S is in the shop getting some maintenance done on the brakes and the rear struts. So I just kind of wanted to take people through what a regular user's perspective might be if they're going from either a older car or a non-Acura and going into either look at a newer TLX, a RDX, an MDX that is the post refresh, where they're using a lot more of the 2-liter turbos, as well as they're looking at integrating in more of the the True Touch pad, as well as some of its just updated brand images and recognitions as a whole. So just for some perspective on what I'm using to base my review and just some of my thoughts from this is I have been driving a Acura for the last, since I was 16, but I've had an Acura since before I was 16. My first car was a 2002 Acura RSX. Then in my junior year of high school, I ended up switching into a 2008 TL Type S in Kinetic Blue Pearl. And now that it is down for maintenance and I am just, living and working in Colorado, I was fortunate enough to get a loaner of a 2021 TLX, which is after their refresh. And it was enough for me to kind of form some reviews, because prior to this, I was looking at cross-shopping the TLX as well as the RDX, a 2019 RDX or a 2021 TLX, aka both of the post refreshes, to kind of see if it was something that I would want to kind of spend my hard-earned money on, or I would want to make the capital investment on it in order to make sure that it was a good idea. So it worked out for me, and maybe this can help some other people figure out if they want to look into the TLX and other stuff like that, or if that's not something they would be interested in. So just for some, brief thoughts, brief opinions and stuff like that on it, I have driven this for a few days now while I've been in Colorado, and I've gotten to take it through a variety of circumstances. I've got to take it through some traffic in downtown Denver. I've also got to take it on some longer interstate drives while I was going on a hike in Golden, Colorado with a friend, as well as just a few other more common, more daily drives, enough of which has just helped me to be able to form an opinion on some of the pros, some of the cons, and some of my thoughts on it as someone that's in their early 20s, that this could potentially be in budget or be in price range for them. Because if I were to buy this in my current standings, we would be looking at, this has around 23,000 miles on it. It's a 2021. It would be sitting around the mid-30s to high 30s for the expected price range for it. So if you're going to be turning over that much hard-earned money, what are some things that you could either persuade or dissuade you from looking at buying this? Well, if you want something that does feel above its weight class for how much it's asking, because right now you could get a newer car with potentially, less miles, more warranty, as well as some more technology. But if you're going to be looking for something that you'd have luxury, you would have the ability for it to last quite a long time, then I think this is something you definitely want to consider. For example, cabin noise quality. I don't know if you can hear this, but it is relatively quiet in here. And granted, this is with no speakers playing, just so there is kind of a better expectation, or a worst case scenario for it. If you have music playing, you have a podcast playing, or something else like that, then the overall cabin quality is going to get even better. However, I will say this: the ELS upgraded audio is absolutely worth it in my opinion, and it sounds fantastic. Granted, I have driven a base RDX in 2019, and I thought the speaker system was pretty good itself. However, with a lot of newer cars, for example my 2002 RSX, I could easily change out the speakers and it was no issue. With a lot of newer cars, it is a lot harder to kind of change out the speakers or do some other customizations, just because the speakers are tied with a lot of stuff. And it is a lot more expensive to try and replace like a 13 speaker system, a 17 speaker system, 16 speakers. I don't remember how much is in the first ELS upgrade as well as the second ELS upgrade. But I do think that that is a worthwhile upgrade. Also, I do believe the tech package is worth it, as well as just for some of the other stuff it adds. I do think that it is absolutely fantastic that Acura does integrate in the Acura safety sweep into this one with the base model, but I think the sensors added with the tech package, like the parking sensors, are worth it in my opinion, just because it's, in my opinion, better for you to have it and not need it than for you to need it or want it and not have it. Because there's maybe a niche setting where it could be darker out, or your camera could have issues with it while you're backing up or you're pulling into a spot, and just having those parking sensors just adds a slight bit more of capability that you might not have expected. I do appreciate the implementation of the blind spot monitoring, and I do think there are just some pretty good implementations of stuff. So now, coming from someone that primarily has driven cars that don't have this feature, we get into stuff like adaptive cruise control and lane centering. So we can just go ahead and set this. I will set it to 70 miles per hour, and we're just going to let it take over and kind of do some like lane centering. And of itself, it is kind of hard for you to trust it completely, but we are going to go around a slight turn. We are going to just trust the safety system itself to kind of guide us around this turn. Wow, this does feel scary for me as someone that is not used to it. And there we go. I don't know if you could see it on the screen based on the angling of it, but after a while it does tell you that steering input is required. I think that's an absolutely fantastic thing, because it means you can't necessarily take your eyes off of the road and just neglect what is going on around you. So we are just going to lower my cruise control a little bit, just to be something more mild and something more reviewed, because I am in a 65 mile per hour zone. I do not want to be speeding. But, if you look at that, it does do a pretty good job at keeping you centered in your lane. It's not necessarily like ping-ponging yourself around the lane to where it looks like you're just swerving or you're distracted while you're driving. And I think that overall, the implementation of it, and being like the first time user of something like this where I'm not as familiar with the safety sense system, as well as adaptive cruise control and lane centering assist, I feel like it was fairly easy to get an understanding of, and it is fairly easy to kind of trust, in my opinion. As well as stuff like lane departure alert, I think that it does pretty good. I think there are some instances where you'll have your turn signal going, and it'll still warn you of lane departure warnings, and that would be in situations where you're changing lanes and stuff like that. As well as, I think it does pretty good with how it chooses to tell you that there's like lane departure warnings, or it tries to keep you in the lane. It does a pretty gentle, just vibration of the wheel, which I don't think is too jarring or too overpowering. And then we get into some other aspects of the interior of a whole. So if we look at the touch points, you've got the arms, you've got the armrest, you've got the little hand pad here for the infotainment. I think Acura did a very great job in nailing all of the touch points. The seats feel absolutely amazing, supportive. I think it's a fantastic addition how it's set to both go all the way back when you are getting out of the car, exiting itself, and it kind of puts it into a neutral state, so it's easier for you to get out of. Then when you get on and turn the car on, it returns it back to your seating position. I think that it's a fantastic implementation. Additionally, when it comes to the start-stop system within the car, where it can deactivate itself when it's at stoplights and stuff like that, I've not driven too many cars itself with the auto stop start system, or I generally disengage it, but I do think that Acura's implementation of it was actually very well done. It's generally been pretty smooth under my understanding. I don't feel like it's jarring, and its switching in between on and off is actually very smooth as compared to some of the systems from Volkswagen and other Hondas that I've been in, as well as I believe a Toyota or some other ones, but I don't necessarily remember because it's not a system that I cared about at the time. But now that I understand the savings of fuel that it can give you, because you do waste a lot of fuel idling at a light for quite a while, I think that its overall implementation is very, very good. And then we can get into one of the more controversial topics that I feel like was overblown in a lot of the reviews that I saw for the post-refresh RDXs, TLXs, MDXs, and stuff like that, which is the true touch pad interface for its overall navigation. So if we go ahead and send it to like its base state like this, I am doing this as an example while I'm driving to show you that it's not very hard of a thing to understand, and you can keep your eyes on the wheel very, very easily. So guess what? Top left, you're in your top left, and you can just kind of like move your finger around, or you'll understand the touchpad with time, and it puts you exactly where you think it would be. There's no surprises. Then you could go into something like CarPlay, and guess what? It's still not that bad of CarPlay. Granted, CarPlay, it's not necessarily a true touch system, so it's, you know, if you swipe over, guess what? You're on your left-hand side. Swipe up, next application. Swipe up, next application. Or if we go into the application screen itself, you can see that just like natural gestures, natural movements, and stuff like that, it still works itself out very, very well and very, very reasonably, in my opinion. So we'll go ahead and launch that back into Maps. I don't necessarily understand why it got as much like controversy or as many issues as people wanted with it. I think that in terms of overall aesthetic and functionality, honestly, this might be more useful than a lot of touchscreen options. I do get that people might complain that it's not as intuitive and stuff like that, and that is a valid complaint that I could see some merit being behind it. However, if you look at stuff where it's like, one, it's a touchpad, it's in a fixed area, so you don't have to worry as much like trying to reach out here, look over here to see what you're tapping. You do just have the ability to kind of understand that it is a touchpad like a laptop keyboard. If you're in the base system, then it's one-to-one. If you're in Apple CarPlay, potentially Android Automotive, then it's closer to like a just regular laptop touchpad. And I don't feel like, for me as a younger person, I'm 22, that it was that hard to understand, that hard to comprehend, or it was that hard to kind of adapt to, where my 2008 TL is a touchscreen itself. And then you just have like the little auxiliary screen to the side, which, you know, I think that it functions very, very nicely and stuff like that. Then two other implementations that I didn't notice in the RDX, but I did notice in this, is the inclusion of the volume knob right next to the touchpad. I think that is fantastic placement, and it's better than if it was up here in the gauge stack, or in the cluster of just buttons for HVAC and stuff like that, as well as the forward and reverse button that is right near it. I think that was very good implementation. I think it's fantastic that they put brake hold, auto start right in this area. And then I think their overall implementation of just the climate system being heated seat, cooled seat, EPIT's the advanced package, as well as the physical buttons, was very well integrated in my opinion. We are just going to go ahead and give this Tacoma some space to go ahead and just merge safely, because I don't want to be disrespectful. I don't want to block him if he is trying to get in, and then we'll just let it settle back down to where it is. I think that the controls that they chose to put by the knee of the driver are very reasonable. It's just their safety features, traction control on and off, as well as their parking sensors are easily disableable if it's not something that you're necessarily interested in or want to have to interact with. I think that the ergonomics of at least the newer Acuras, I cannot speak for the pre-refresh models where it was still the like two touchscreens and stuff like that. I think that the ergonomics themselves are actually very great, and then we'll just let it like drop down a gear. We can show off a little bit of acceleration, and as you can see, it does accelerate very, very nicely, and it does do a very good job at handling itself. So then we get into stuff like its dynamic modes. I think that its dynamic mode implementation is very nice in of itself. I don't see why you would want to be switching between these too much. Like, I don't think it changes the functionality necessarily that much, or it's something you would be interacting with that much daily. But I think that it's great that they wanted to include it, and it's a great feature for them to have in general. And honestly, again, it just kind of works with their overall design, where I think the ergonomics are just pretty fantastic all the way around. I don't think that there is a single issue or a single down point that I have felt that there is within the cabin of the Acura in terms of ergonomics, switchgear, and stuff like that. All of the switches have felt extremely high quality, and like they would be able to last and hold up for years. If there was a concern that I had within the cabin, it is that the the paddles for the transmission that are attached to the steering wheel, both plus and minus for you to change gears, I do feel like they are rubberized, and I'm not necessarily sure how that would age or hold up with time. I think that a lot of rubberized stuff either tends to lose its functionality and lose its coating with time and ends up feeling disgusting, or it gets stickier with time.
Watch out, vehicle on shoulder ahead.
I think that could be a pretty big issue if that is something that were to occur. And then we do get into another thing that I feel like there was a decent bit of people had issues with, or they didn't necessarily like its implementation compared to other things, which is the button transmission. And the common argument or complaint that I heard was, why not just make it like a regular gear shifter in of itself, or why make it complicated with buttons when it could just be like a regular thing where you go through all the gears. I think that this transmission idea is actually a lot better in functionality. I do believe you could have it being electronic. There's a lot less wear itself on the gears, to where if you're going from park into reverse, that's just one gear change. But if you're going from park straight into drive, again, it's only one gear change. It's not like you're going through a physical linkage. Where to go from park to drive, you would have to go through reverse, then through neutral, then through another thing. I think that it could work to lower overall wear on components throughout the system, potentially allowing for better longevity, quicker switches, and easier changing between gears over time. Additionally, when it comes to the response of the system, I feel like it's been extremely quick to respond. There's been no delays, no hesitations, no issues in the system. I do understand that having an electronic gear shifter as opposed to a physical one adds slight bits more of potential complexity into the system and more things to break, but I do believe a company like Acura has done some pretty good reliability testing and quality testing to ensure that these errors are minimized. Which gets me through the portion of the video which is primarily concerned with the ergonomics of the cabin, the switchgear, the touch points, as well as just the implementation of the features around us, as well as the fit, feel, and finish of some of just the items that you would be interacting with daily. I think that 26 miles per gallon really is not that bad in general. Granted, I'm coming from a 2008 TL where my highest mileage ever has been 29 miles per gallon, and my general city miles per gallon is 18 miles per gallon. Highway, I'm generally around 22. So when I put it in the lens of stuff like that, man, this gas mileage is absolutely fantastic. Granted, it does take premium. It's what you could run it on a lower octane, but I would just recommend you generally run it on premium. As when you are turbocharging the system, you do have more opportunities for knock generally to be introduced into the system. So just for your engine's sake, I would recommend running it on 91, 93, just seeing what's available in your area and choosing to stick with that fuel. But I think that especially for a full-time all-wheel drive system, being the super handling all-wheel drive, the 26, 27 miles per gallon in mixed city and interstate driving is honestly really, really good. And that's not something that I would be scoffing at, especially given the power and acceleration that I have managed to see with a system like this. It has been quite enjoyable. Also, I would like to bring up, when we do get into the interior of this car, I do think that it brings some advantages over older sedans as well as other vehicles in the class, but I do still think that it has its own shortcomings. For example, in my 2008 Acura TL, I feel like the back seats are a lot smaller. Granted, these ones are bigger, but for just regular sized adults, I still think that these rear seats are smaller than they should be. If it is a full size, if it's a mid-size sedan, then honestly it's pretty accurate. I think that exterior styling wise, it looks absolutely fantastic with the wider rear end, the aggressive front styling, the aggressive front hood, and just the overall aggressive portfolio. But I think that, there are some sacrifices that were made to the interior. For example, if you're looking at the distance of just your dash overall, the car looks amazing, but I think that, the overall use of the cabin space itself was neglected to make it look better than this. Especially when it comes to the rear seat occupants, their headroom's going to be limited, their legroom's going to be limited, but I would not feel bad about putting people in the rear seat for a middle to long range trip. And I think that is just praise to some of the ergonomics. It is a quieter cabin with a pretty comfortable ride. So although they might not have the most space to move around, a lot of the other things that could annoy them or could cause issues with them are pretty well done. When it comes to its overall usability, I think that it has ample trunk space. It does have folding rear seats, which my current TL does not have, and I really wish I had. And its overall storage and usability, I think, are absolutely fantastic. So I think Acura did nail it with this refresh and revision of the TLX concerns. And then we can just get into some of the more niche aspects of this. However, we are going to choose to continue that from a different opportunity or a different portion of this drive. So we're getting close to Mount Galbraith Park or something like that. Sorry, wow, that was, what was that? That was kind of disrespectful and unsafe, but thank God I'm in a safe car. So this is Gabe from the future here. I just wanted to do a little bit of a voiceover portion for this part of the video and just talk about some of the driving dynamics of the TLX, as well as some of the stuff that I noticed when you're doing a more spirited portion of driving that you might not notice day to day and stuff like that. I think that it can go without saying that the TLX is a heavy car, but most cars are pretty heavy today. And when it comes to that, I think that it's important to say that when you're in portions where perhaps there's a lot of braking or you're going downhill, you are going to notice that you can't necessarily just coast with the car in some instances. It does like to pick up speed, and depending on where you are, you might not necessarily want to have that much speed being picked up. Then I do think it is worth noting, despite it being a heavy car, I feel like it was able to maintain a neutral position, and that its suspension was able to work very well with the weight that it was trying to overcome in corners and stuff like that. It felt like a very neutral car, and that I think that's a very good thing. It didn't feel like the rear wanted to kick out, the front wanted to kick out, or like it was going to be hard to tame if you wanted to drive it spiritedly. Now, granted, it is worth noting that a lot of this does come down to tires and other different factors. For example, if you have a cheaper tire, it might not necessarily have as much grip, so you might feel that one end starts to slip out more or less than another portion. Then I do think it also is worth noting that super handling all-wheel drive, or SH all-wheel drive, I feel like is a fantastic system when it comes to its ability to torque vector and really help you just rotate around corners. I think that it helps in enhancing the handling of the car past some of the other all-wheel drive systems available in the segment or from competitors like Subaru, Audi, and other ones. Granted, I have not had the most seat time in those, but I do like the way that super handling all-wheel drive does compare to my limited experience with those. Also, continuing off of the other all-wheel drive systems that are present with other companies, I do think it is worth noting that the 10-speed that is present within this TLX does a really good job of handling itself well and kind of doing what you would expect it to. In more spirited driving, it's completely comfortable holding down longer times in between shifts, or letting you always have the ability to accelerate out, especially considering that it is a 2-liter turbo. That is what is propelling you. It does a great job at building boost quickly and just making sure that you always have power available where you need it. I think that if it was a naturally aspirated engine, you might face issues, and I can't even imagine how the TLX Type S would feel. I'm very jealous, and I would love to test one of those out. sometime, Acura, if you're hearing this and there's any opportunities to test stuff, please let me know. I would love to do that from a mechanical engineer's perspective. I also do think it is worth noting that items that are a lot more new to the market and people might not have a lot of experience about, like electronic braking systems as well as electronic steering. I think that in the TLX, I could handle with having some heavier steering or having the ability to dial it up even more with the electric steering system, just because I do like heavier steering, or at least I'm more used to it from my TL Type S. When it comes to, the braking system within it, I think that it was doing very well. It didn't feel like there was very much fading, and it always felt extremely responsive regardless of what was happening. And I think it would be interesting to see how a TLX would track, if that is something that Acura would have the opportunity to do or someone else would have the opportunity to do. It's not necessarily in my budget or in my wheelhouse right now, considering this is not my car and I do not have the extended amount of time to take it to a track, nor am I the most experienced person tracking cars. But I think that in total, when it comes to looking at the 2021 TLX and the revision that Acura did, I think they absolutely nailed it and knocked it out of the park. It was a fantastic car from when it comes to the interior, the touch points, stuff people are going to be interacting with daily, miles per gallon, and everything that would be associated with the running cost. I feel like the overall reliability of Acuras and Hondas is always fantastic, so you're going to be lucking out again there. And then when you look at some of the handling and just enjoyability characteristics, if you do want to look to push the TLX, it's absolutely there. And then you get to the exterior styling that looks absolutely fantastic, and I think this is a winning package that hands down, I think I would be comfortable recommending this to anyone looking.